Mickey Burke gets one scene in Goodfellas. She's the hostess wife, the woman in the living room when Karen Hill first understands she isn't married to a regular man. She throws the party. She delivers the gossip. She holds the room together. And that's it. That's everything the most important mob film ever made decided to do with the wife of Jimmy Burke. The real Mickey Burke lived at 8148 102nd Road in South Ozone Park, Queens, for the better part of 4 decades. She raised children, Jimmy, named after outlaws, Frank James Burke, Jesse James Burke, and watched those names become prophecies. Her daughter Catherine married into the Bonanno crime family. The FBI dug up her basement in 2013 and found the remains of a man strangled with a dog chain in 1969, meaning Mickey had lived above a body for 44 years without saying a word. She was never charged with a crime. She never gave an interview. She died in 2020 at 89, and the only public record of her passing was a funeral home notice, limiting attendance to 30 because of COVID. Here's the detail that tells you how deep this went. Catherine Burke demanded $100,000 for the use of the family name in the film. The producers refused. That's why the character is Jimmy Conway instead of Jimmy Burke, because the real family wanted payment for something Scorsese wanted to borrow, and nobody could make them give it up. The most basic biographical fact in the most famous mob movie ever made exists because a woman you've never heard of said no. Goodfellas gave Karen Hill approximately 34 minutes of screen time, roughly 24% of the film. Lorraine Bracco narrates entire stretches of the story. The audience sees the excitement, the fear, the gun in the towels, the spiral into paranoia. David Chase later cited it as the primary inspiration for Carmela Soprano, building an entire series around the idea that the wife's perspective could carry equal dramatic weight. But it came at a cost. The film built its portrait of mob wife experience around the woman who eventually left and talked, the woman who stayed, who never spoke, who held the household together while Jimmy planned the largest cash robbery in American history and then murdered most of the crew who helped him pull it off. She got a hostess party and a credited role that most viewers can't. Name? Pileggi's book was built entirely on Henry and Karen Hill's cooperation. Mickey Burke never sat down with anyone. Her maiden name has never appeared in any published source. No documentation exists about her ethnic background, her family of origin, or how she met Jimmy Burke. The silence that protected her from prosecution also erased her from the story. The film didn't invent the erasure. It reproduced it. Jimmy Burke married Mickey in 1962. Half Irish and half Italian, in a world where that distinction mattered, he could never be made. So he operated as an associate under Paul Vario's protection, running his own crew out of Robert's Lounge, a bar near the airport that served as the planning room for everything from truck hijackings to the Lufthansa job. Mickey married into all of it. According to Henry Hill's account in Wise Guy, an ex-boyfriend had been harassing Mickey before the wedding. On their wedding day, police found his remains cut into over a dozen pieces inside his car. It's the kind of story that tells you everything about who Jimmy Burke was and how he solved problems. Here's what nobody mentions when they repeat it. No independent police report. No contemporaneous news article. No court record from 1962 has ever been cited to corroborate this. It comes from Hill. Only Hill. And Hill had a complicated relationship with the truth. What is documented? The marriage, the children, the house. While Mickey raised those children on 102nd Road, Jimmy maintained a long-running affair with Phyllis DeSimone, Tommy DeSimone's teenage sister, reportedly beginning when she was 16, running concurrently with the marriage for nearly 2 decades. No source records Mickey's reaction. Either she didn't know, unlikely, given how small that world was, or she knew and chose to stay. Both possibilities say something about the architecture of the life she was living. The same structure that gave her a home and a family also required her to absorb whatever came with it and carry it without complaint. Mickey Burke was never charged with a crime. Not once. Across every investigation that touched Jimmy's world, the Lufthansa case, the Kennedy Airport corruption probe, the Boston College point-shaving prosecution, the Richard Eaton murder trial, for the 2014 Vincent Asaro indictment. Her name doesn't appear in a single filing. Henry Hill's cooperation led to more than 50 federal convictions covering over 200 separate crimes. He apparently never implicated Mickey in any of them, but she wasn't absent from the machinery. She was the house where the machinery lived, the kitchen where the crew ate while they planned, the living room where associates came and went at hours that had nothing to do with any legitimate business. And in the most critical weeks of the entire Lufthansa aftermath, the weeks that determined who lived and who died, she picked up the phone and did something that looked like friendship but functioned like intelligence. Work. $5,875,000 in cash and $875,000 in jewelry. Taken from the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK on December 11, 1978, in 64 minutes, by a crew of 11 men. The largest cash robbery in American history at the time. The crew couldn't hold it together. They were spending visibly fur coats, Cadillacs, flashing cash in the same neighborhoods where the FBI was already asking questions. The murder started almost immediately. Stax Edwards, shot 6 times in his apartment. Joe Buddha Manry, shot and left in his car. Martin Krugman, last seen January 6, 1979. His body has never been found. During this exact period after Henry Hill's arrest on drug charges in 1980, while Jimmy was calculating whether Henry had become too dangerous to leave breathing, Mickey Burke called Karen Hill every day. This isn't speculation. It comes from Karen herself, as told to Pileggi. Mickey kept asking when Henry was coming home. How was he? What was he doing? Was he talking to anyone? Karen understood what was happening. Mickey was calling for Jimmy. She was gathering information through the wife's social network at the precise moment when the wrong answer could have gotten Henry killed. It wasn't a crime. Calling another woman and asking about her husband isn't illegal under any statute, but it shows exactly how the infrastructure worked. Mob wives functioned as a parallel communication system invisible to wiretaps because there was nothing criminal in the content. Mickey's daily calls to Karen were surveillance conducted through the language of friendship. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. The information she gathered was feeding directly into Jimmy's decision about whether to order a murder. Did Mickey know what Jimmy was planning to do with what she found out? Or was she just following instructions without asking what they were for? Let me know what you think. The men in Jimmy's crew who couldn't keep their mouths shut died for it. Stax because he was careless. Krugman because he talked. Frenchie because he spent too visibly. The women who could keep silent, who were expected to keep silent as a condition of the life, survived. Mickey's silence wasn't just cultural loyalty or personal discipline. It was the operating principle that kept her alive in a world that killed people for talking. She didn't just maintain omerta. She was better at it than every man in the crew. Jimmy named his sons after outlaws. The names turned out to be prophecies. Frank James Burke drove a backup vehicle during the Lufthansa heist itself, a teenager serving as logistics for the biggest cash robbery in the country. By his early 20s, he was dealing heroin, associated with the Gambino family. On May 18, 1987, Frank James Burke was shot dead by a drug dealer outside the Sunrest Tavern on Liberty Avenue in East New York. He was approximately 27 years old. Mickey buried her firstborn son. What that did to her, how she carried it, whether she blamed Jimmy's world or understood it as the only possible outcome, none of that is recorded. Because nobody asked. And Mickey didn't volunteer. Catherine's path led to the same gravity through a different door. She married Anthony Bruno Indelicato, whose father was a Bonanno capo, and who himself had been convicted for the 1979 assassination of Carmine Galante. Shot at point-blank range while eating lunch on a patio, a cigar still in his mouth at a federal prison in Terre Haute, Indiana in 1992. Former Bonanno capo Dominic Cicale described the dynamic plainly. Catherine was basically in control of everything, the safety deposit box, her mother Mickey, and the rest of the family's affairs. The phrasing is worth sitting with. Mickey isn't described as managing the family. She's described as being managed by her daughter. Whatever authority Mickey once held had passed to Catherine, who held the keys to a safe deposit box where Lufthansa money still sat decades after the heist. Robin Burke, the fourth child, drove a school bus in Queens, a job so ordinary it reads like fiction against the backdrop of the family she came from. She held one of the 2 keys to that same safe deposit box. The proceeds from a $5.8 million heist moved not through the men who planned it or the crew who executed it, but through 2 women the FBI had never looked at twice. Count the reach. Lucchese through Jimmy's crew, Bonanno through Catherine's marriage, Gambino through Frank's associations, Genovese through Robin's child. 4 of the 5 families touched by a single household in South Ozone Park. In June 2013, the FBI came back to 102nd Road with jackhammers. Agents spent 3 days excavating the basement and backyard of the same house where Mickey had lived since the 1960s. Beneath the floor, investigators found human remains. Testing confirmed they belonged to Paul Katz, a mob-connected associate who disappeared in December of 1969. According to the later indictment of Vincent Asaro, Katz had been strangled by Jimmy Burke and Asaro with a dog chain, then buried beneath the family home. The remains had been there for 44 years. Through every holiday dinner, every birthday, every ordinary evening in that house. And Mickey lived above them through all of it, through the Lufthansa planning, through the killing months, through Jimmy's death in 1996 behind bars, through her son's murder on a sidewalk 10 miles away. Whether she knew is a question no source has ever answered. No journalist ever asked her. No prosecutor ever compelled her to respond, and she never offered. Street Charles Cemetery sits in East Farmingdale, about 45 miles east of the house on 102nd Road. The headstone is shared. 3 names on 1 piece of granite. Francis J., 1959 to 1987, shot dead outside a bar at 27. James J., 1931 to 1996, died of cancer behind bars at 64, never having spent a free day after his conviction. Francis L., 1931 to 2020, 89 years old, no obituary, no public statement. Funeral limited to 30 people. Above the 3 names, a single line, Street Anthony, pray for us, the patron saint of lost things. Nothing on the stone tells you who these people were. Nothing explains why the first died so young, why the second died behind bars, or what the third one knew about any of it, just the dates. Just the silence she chose and kept and carried to the same ground where her murdered son and imprisoned husband were already waiting. The same silence that made her invisible to the film, to the record, and to every person who ever watched that hostess party scene and never once thought to ask who the woman in the living room actually was. If you enjoyed this film on the woman Goodfellas deleted, then you'll want to see our film on the Goodfellas never showed you how John Gotti took over the Gambino family, which popped up on the upper left of your screen.